भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं तं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
We continue with chapter 3, Karma Yoga, and here is the essence of the verses 16 to 18, and the translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Evam pravartitam chakram na anuvartayati ihayah aghayuhu indriyaramaha mogham पार्थस जीवति यस्तु आत्मरतिः एव स्यात् आत्मतृप्तः च मानवः आत्मनि एव च सन्तुष्टः तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते न एव तस्य कृतेन अर्थः न अकृतेन इह कश्चन न च अस्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चित् अर्थ व्यपाश्रयः. Here is the English translation. He who in this life does not follow the wheel thus set revolving, whose life is sinful, whose contentment lies in the senses, he lives in vain, O Partha. I repeat again. He who in this life does not follow the wheel thus set revolving, whose life is sinful, whose contentment lies in the senses, he lives in vain, O Partha. Next verse. But the man whose delight is in the self alone, who is content in the self, who rejoices only in the self, for him there is no action that he needs to. Next verse. Neither has he any profit to gain in this life from the actions he has done or from the actions he has not done, nor is there any living creature on whom he needs to rely for any purpose. Now let us go back to verse number 15 where we left off. No action to be born of Brahma, the Veda. Brahma springs from the imperishable. Therefore, the all-pervading Brahma is ever established in Yajna. So here Bhagavan explained the Vedas as Brahma and the creator of Brahma, the sequence of the manifestation, and he says that action and all knowledge of it is contained in the Vedas, and so the Vedas are the expression of eternal life. Bhagavan says, the source of all creation is the Veda, the field of almost absolute intelligence, which underlies and pervades all activity responsible for the creation and evolution of life. So this being the source of all creation, then it is said to be Brahma, the creator. So now we understand Brahma or the Veda is naturally the source of all activity, and that is why Bhagavan says no action to be born of Brahma. Bhagavan further says that divine consciousness or the God consciousness, the Brahma, is present in Yajna. And he further says divine consciousness can be developed through those types of action which help evolution. It cannot be developed through sinful or impious actions which tend to make the mind coarse and lead to inertia. This robs the mind of its ability to transcend relativity and attain divine consciousness. And this is why Bhagavan says that all actions which fall into the category of Yajna carry divine consciousness in them. Bhagavan further says in verse number 16, he who in this life does not follow the wheel thus set revolving, whose life is sinful, whose contentment lies in the senses, he lives in vain, O Partha. When Bhagavan says, the wheel thus set revolving, he is explaining that life passes through different spheres of existence, gross and subtle, and by this means the process of evolution is carried out. In the beginning of life, it is in the unmanifested pure consciousness, and this is referred to as the imperishable. And if a man remains always in the field of the senses and fails to reach the source of his being, if his mind does not travel from gross to subtle in order to realize that imperishable, which is the ultimate source of all creation, he lives in vain. So again, Bhagavan is saying that if one remains in the field of senses and fails to reach the source of his being and does not travel from gross to subtle in order to know the imperishable, which is the ultimate source of all creation, he lives in vain. He certainly has not made use of the opportunity of enjoying that great happiness which lies beyond the range of the senses. And he has not traversed the whole field of life. Besides, he has not gone from origin back to origin. He does not follow the wheel thus set revolving. Again, the wheel is set revolving. And for the one who remains only in the field of the senses, does not follow the wheel thus set revolving. He has committed sin against himself and sin against God because he has failed to rise to fulfillment. So, Bhagavan says that his life is sinful. Now let us look at the one who has followed the wheel of creation. Bhagavan says, one who has realized life through all the subtle and gross layers of existence and lives the ultimate being through all actions, who lives fulfillment in God consciousness, then you can say he has followed the wheel of creation. And further, he has gone to that whence he came, which means he has gone from origin back to origin. And let me repeat this again. So one who has realized life through all the subtle and gross layers of existence and who is able to live the ultimate being through all actions, that means he remains the ultimate being through all actions, and who lives fulfillment in God consciousness, then you can say that he has followed the wheel of creation and he has gone to that from where he came. In the following verses, Bhagavan brings out in detail the state of one who is enjoying this full life. Bhagavan continues, but the man whose delight is in the self alone, who is content in the self, who rejoices only in the self, for him there is no action that he needs to. I repeat again, but the man whose delight is in the self alone, who is content in the self, who rejoices only in the self, for him there is no action that he needs to do. Now let us look at this man Bhagavan is speaking about. He is one who is firmly established in the self, the eternal being, and is not involved with anything else. He is one who has realized the being as separate from the field of activity. And he is the one who is always detached from everything other than his own self. And he is the one who, despite any activity on the surface of life, eternally remains in the awareness of the self. And he is the one who, living through the relative states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and sleeping, is ever established in the absolute state of consciousness, which is the state of being, the awareness of self. Now we know that all actions that a man performs are prompted by the desire to accomplish something and to enjoy it. So when he reaches the field of absolute bliss consciousness, and this is a state which is the fulfillment of all desires, and in this state which is the fulfillment of all desires, he becomes filled with lasting contentment. And he is contented because the purpose of all desires and actions is achieved. And so Bhagavan is saying that for him there is no action that he needs to do. So again, normally a man performs actions because prompted by desire and because he wants to accomplish something and enjoy the fruits of it. But when he reaches the field of absolute bliss consciousness, then this is the state where there is ultimate fulfillment of all desires, and so he gains lasting contentment because the purpose of all desires and actions is achieved. So having gained this, then Bhagavan says for him there is no action that he needs to do. Then what happens? Does he then cease to act? Bhagavan is answering in the following verse. Neither has he any profit to gain in this life from the actions he has done or from the actions he has not done, nor is there any living creature on whom he needs to rely for any purpose. I repeat again. Neither has he any profit to gain in this lifetime from the actions he has done or from the actions he has not done, nor is there any living creature on whom he needs to rely for any purpose. So here Bhagavan is saying, such a man who is thus contented in himself certainly continues to act in the world, but his behavior has become a natural behavior. It is no longer motivated by selfish desires, nor is its effectiveness disturbed by any shortcomings that might arise from dullness on his part. And how has this come about? Because he has fulfilled the purpose of all possible desires and all possible actions in his life. So, having fulfilled the purpose of all possible desires and all possible actions in his life, he now engages himself in actions motivated not by selfish individuality but by cosmic purpose. Again, he is now engaging himself in actions motivated not by selfish individuality but by cosmic purpose. So here you have to understand that he has not ceased to act, he has not stopped actions, but his actions are not motivated by selfish individuality, but his actions are motivated by cosmic purpose. So, through him works the divine intelligence, for he has become a fitting instrument to carry out the divine plan in the world. And Bhagavan further says, such a life is a natural life. Again, such a life of a man is a natural life, and it is the result of the established intellect. So even this verse has been interpreted wrong. It has generally been thought to advocate desireless action, arrived at by creating a mental sense of disinterestedness in action. So this interpretation is wrong. Such a sense of disinterestedness has no bearing on the realization of either the self-consciousness, cosmic consciousness, or God consciousness. And besides, it does not in any way add to the effectiveness in life. It can only weaken all phases of life. It will weaken all phases of life, which includes material, mental, and spiritual. And so Bhagavan is saying the way to live the natural life is based on the result of the established intellect and developing these higher states of consciousness, which are the cosmic consciousness and ultimately the God consciousness. In the next verse, Bhagavan emphasizes the validity of action for the integration of life. Here ends the essence of these verses 16, 17 and 18, chapter 3, Karma Yoga. Translation and commentary by Maharshi Ji. Now I will add a few words. We clearly understand that the way to perform right actions is to develop the higher states of consciousness, experience the transcendental consciousness, and know that you are the being. Then establish the separation of this activity and the being in cosmic consciousness, where you see the activity is separate and you remain as the being. And you gain the God consciousness, where everything is brought together and there is integration of both the action and the being together. So the foremost important aspect of all sadhana is to gain this transcendental consciousness, is to attain the state of samadhi and know the transcendental consciousness, that you are that transcendent, the absolute pure consciousness. And by the repeated samadhis, then you grow into cosmic consciousness. That means you attain the state of established cosmic consciousness, where the self and the non-self are separate, where the activity and the being are separate. But until you attain that, then you still need to continue working. And so let us look at the practical aspects of how we continue with our sadhana and continue to work in a way which will lead to this. So again, we realize the importance of yajna, which is a sacrificial action. And all yajna is for the welfare of the individual and for the whole of human race and for the whole of creation, in fact. So the most important thing is to perform all actions with this yajna spirit. And so this comprises actions performed selflessly in a spirit of surrender and sacrifice to a higher goal in life. And when you start performing the actions in this way, then these selfless actions set the wheel of progress moving towards the ultimate destination of peace and bliss. So it is important to understand here that one does not oppose this wheel of progress by performing actions which are violating the natural law or the dharma. Then one has to go through so much suffering and sorrow, and life becomes sinful. And all this happens because one has natural infatuation with the senses, and one falls an easy prey to the enchantment of the sense objects. And because these sense objects provide instant pleasure, then People all over the world are continuously indulging in these sensual desires. When one does not understand this path of yajna and this knowledge is not understood, then the ignorant helplessly take to blind paths of sensuality. For example, if you show a child a 1,000 rupees note or $1,000 or $100 note, and also show the candy in the other hand, then the child naturally takes the candy because it seems more attractive and it does not know the value of the money. And if you give it to the adult, then he naturally chooses the money just because he knows the value of the money. So one who is ignorant of this knowledge naturally continues to pick these sensory objects which are like candies in the world and lose this precious aspect of gaining the bliss consciousness. So if one can develop some restraint over these bombarding sensual temptations and act instead on the principle of service and sacrifice, then one gains all the prosperity and peace that is needed. In the beginning, it might be difficult to initiate these actions completely in the spirit of yajna. But if one continues to practice transcendental meditation and is gaining this knowledge and keeps rising in the consciousness, then it becomes a natural existence not to want all these sensory pleasures and not to indulge so much in them. Here it is also important to understand that everyone has some obligatory duties in terms of his family, profession or career, and in terms of the society or community. And so these obligatory functions should be performed in a spirit of service and sacrifice. And such actions will only be conducive to take one to the path of self-consciousness or the self-realization. Now, an enlightened person has no obligatory duties in the world because he has no more desires to eradicate. The enlightened one stays ever rooted in the experience of self, and besides, the enlightened is thoroughly contented with his own self and he is totally self-sufficient for his happiness. And this is why he has no obligatory duties. The only way a person can rise above these demanding physical desires and these emotional attachments and cravings, the intellectual plans and programs to implement them, and the many constant obsessions, is to rise in consciousness. One has to be beyond the consciousness of this physical body, the mind and the intellect. One has to experience this pure consciousness. So gaining this pure consciousness then is a very practical thing. It is a very practical thing. And this is the only way life becomes natural. All seeking is to have this natural life, natural blissful life, natural contented life, natural peaceful life. The earlier one becomes familiar with this field of absolute consciousness, the field of relative consciousness in the subtler and subtler states, and then the absolute consciousness, then life becomes so much more meaningful and purposeful, and one can become Jivan Mukta very easily. And this is why this enlightenment and the spirituality has to start in childhood. Maharshi Ji has given techniques. This transcendental meditation he has recommended from the age of 4. Then their life is normally and very naturally established in this bliss, and they have all the nature's support right from the beginning. These children will naturally rise above all this mud without even knowing this mud. And then the suffering and the suffocation of a generation before them, they naturally and spontaneously live a life of bliss and in freedom and with a lot of creative intelligence. But for some reason, there is also this misunderstanding, especially among many Indians, that one should wait till they are very old to gain spirituality. And they think that if children learn to meditate and do any of the spiritual practices, that they will renounce and all of them will become sannyasis. In reality, it is not that easy to become a sannyasi. One has to have it in their Jyotish, the astrological chart. Most of the people are born to be householders, and that will happen very naturally. In the traditional Gurukul system, when all went to Gurukul, then one maintained this purity of life and gained this knowledge and gained the higher states of consciousness. And at a certain age, like around 25 or so, then the Guru naturally told him to choose whether he wanted to remain a brahmachari, or whether he wanted to go out and get married. And most of the people will choose to become married. Since we don't have the Gurukul system now, it is better to encourage our children and grandchildren to learn to meditate from a very early age and to be eating sattvic Ayurveda food and Ayurveda routine and live a very natural life in this Sanatana Dharma, because the life in Sanatana Dharma is a very natural life. So if you remove this ignorance and misunderstandings, then the life in Sanatana Dharma is a very exalted and a very natural life. So I end here and we will continue tomorrow. Jai Gurudev. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu.